Okay. Um,
Well, thank you, Joe, so much. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Regenerative Collective. Hi, my name is Joelle. I just want to extend just a huge gratitude to the work that you all do. I appreciate you all immensely and the relationships that I've met through the work, friendships and relationships with land also, even in my own space that I have. And so I just come with a lot of gratitude and recognition of that. And I'm really excited to be talking to you all tonight and sharing the space with you. Even though we're virtual, it feels really nice to be together. And I want to introduce Steele and Emery as also co-hosts. We're gonna all be talking and jumping in together. We're here to just facilitate. We started Building with Earth, and I've met Emery and Steele through Building with Earth and working on Adobe. And so we want to just kind of share what we do know, answer questions, and also encourage other people to maybe consider this process. There's a lot when it comes to architecture and Adobe process. So we are going to mostly focus on Superadobe, which is a little bit different technique, which we'll get into. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead. Can I share the screen? Do I have that access, Joe?
I believe so. Let me see.
We'll see.
Okay, it's working.
Is it working?
Yes.
Yay. So yeah, can I expand it? I don't think that's my presentation.
Good. This is impressive.
I'll let Steele and Emery say hello while I figure this out.
Hello. My name is Emery. He, him.
I'm Steele. I go by they, them pronouns, and it's really an honor to be here and just be talking about all of this.
Yeah,
I'm
agreed.
excited.
We met at the Cal Earth Institute for Superadobe and Earth Building. I took the internship there the end of last year, and I met Steele through there.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just found it accidentally through a friend of mine that invited me to go and check it out, who was into it. And I went and I fell in love with the concept, and I immediately signed up and was able to take the internship, fortunately, which we'll be talking about a little bit in a second. Looks like you got it. So stop.
I feel like Joe and Regenerative Collective did this, but we just want to also acknowledge the land that we reside in, our ancestors, relatives, and relations, past, present, and emerging. And yeah, I think we want to just kind of start with introductions, our journey with Adobe and Earth Building, which Emery has started. So go ahead, Emery.
Well, I talked a little bit about how I started with it. It's just I was asked to go take a course, which I was fortunate enough to take, and was able to take the internship that they had at the Cal Earth Institute in Hesperia, and that's where I met Steele there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I got a little bit of an earlier start. My aunt is the administrative director there, so I started volunteering around like the age of 15. I was fortunate to be going to high school like down the street from the institute, so I'd go there at the end of the days and just help clean up, and did some work exchange, and I was able to take some classes. And then a few years passed, and I finally took an extended class, and that's where I met Emery. We happened to be in the same one. And yeah, that's been my journey so far. And now I'm here with Joelle, and we're building, so it's been good.
Yeah. So for myself, my relatives are from New Mexico, and I come from a long legacy of folks who are from Pueblo, and this is obviously in New Mexico, adobe structures are very common, and in a recent trip, I was inspired again to think about that. I work with clay, I work with ceramics, and so I think I found my way to all of this. It was kind of all happening at once, working with clay, thinking about Adobe, thinking about kind of imagining different futures. And then also I write, and I read a lot. And so I think I actually found my way to CalEarth through Rumi, because Rumi is a philosopher that is very much inspired by inspired the founder of the Superadobe CalEarth Institute, which we'll talk about more. And I read that there was a Rumi Dome in California, and it was in Hesperia. So I found my way there, and with carrying those questions, carrying that curiosity, and meeting really great folks. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we are. And Steele and Emery and I have been working on a project together, which we're excited to talk about, but also want to give you some kind of context of how and why building with earth, building with Adobe is important to think about. And yeah, did I skip something? No.
Good.
Okay.
Started with him.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna talk. I'm gonna kind of skip a slide and then come back to it. But I do want to acknowledge that while we are focusing on Superadobe and some of the methods at CalEarth, that there is a kind of historical and cultural context that we want to acknowledge as well. So some of the largest in the world Adobe structures are found in Iran. You can find them all around the world. It's one of the most ancient forms of building, and the tallest Adobe structure is found in New York in the Poe Museum. Find them in China, Yemen, right? So I want us to kind of acknowledge that there is this historical and cultural context, and that we're just talking about a very small slice of that context, and a small method of approaching building with earth, right? So there's a lot of ways to build with bricks, different types of strategies that indigenous folks have carried and acknowledged, and what we're bringing to the table is just what has been adapted at CalEarth, which is the Superadobe method. And so I want to go back to this slide, and I'll let maybe Steele and Emery take over a little bit.
To Nader a little bit. First I can read the Rumi quote. "The earth turns to gold in the hands of the wise." And then there's another quote. A spider web is a natural structure that works by ultimate tension, and an eggshell is a structure that works by ultimate compression. I like that. So Nader Khalili was an architect that was born in Iran and went to school there, and he started an architecture firm and ended up very successful and was making buildings in LA. And from what I've heard of him, he realized while he was building and had his successful firm that this was not the right way to build. It was not accessible to people, and it wasn't sustainable for the earth. So he sold his firm and he returned to Iran to do research, and he traveled around and looked at different buildings and brainstormed different ways to try to figure out how to build that would be accessible with materials that were prevalent everywhere in the world. Initially he was thinking about doing ceramic houses where you build with clay and fire them. but after some trial and error and some R&D, he landed on the idea of using sandbags and the arch forms, which you see behind the picture of him standing there. So sandbags are used, or we're able to use sandbags for it because we use the arch. The arch form, what it does is it puts the bags in compression. It allows the bags to be in kind of a natural angle with the gravity of the earth, and it locks them into place. So you can build house structures with sandbags as long as you're using like arch principles. You can see perfect timing. The other material that he uses for or that's used in Superadobe specifically is barbed wire. And the barbed wire, what that does is that creates the tension or the tensile strength. Earth works very well in compression. So the arch is compressed by the gravity. But if you tried to pull it apart, if you tried to pull those sandbags away from one another, they would pull right away. And so you use barbed wire between each row of sandbags, and it creates tensile force so that you can't detach them from one another, creates friction. And that's the basic premise of Superadobe and what he came up with. A big part of Nader's motivation was to create a means for building structures for anybody in the world for disaster relief. So using the most prevalent materials, the earth right below your feet, and then just being able to form it in such a way that it would last for a very long amount of time if you tend to it. So that's what draws me and has drawn us, I suppose, to this technology, is that it's just another way to build with just the very basic materials. It is quite labor intensive though. I can read this. Adobe and Superadobe. A Superadobe is a form of earth bag architecture developed by architect and CalEarth founder Nader Khalili using long sandbags, Superadobe bags. You can also use single sandbags, by the way. Barbed wire, on-site earth, and a few tools. Khalili devised a revolutionary building system that integrates traditional earth architecture with contemporary global safety requirements and passes severe earthquake code tests in California. This technology has been published by NASA. It was actually, he spoke with NASA about this at the inception of the Institute. That was part of what got it founded. Endorsed by the United Nations, featured in countless world media outlets, and awarded the prestigious Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 2004. It comes from years of meditation, hands-on research, and development, inspired by traditional earth architecture in the deserts of Iran and adapted for the modern usage, simplified so that anyone can build. There was something else I was going to mention about it. Yeah.
It's like an interesting. If you wanted to, I don't know how we're feeling, we can probably get into like the logistics of it, more technical terms, if that's.
Let me see.
Yeah, so like we were saying before, maybe some of the Southwest technologies that we've seen are probably more Adobe brick, and those methods work and are just as sustainable. I think the difference in terms is, I think what Nader brought was really thinking about the dome shape, right? And then really thinking about, like, I know there's some folks in here who may do ceramics. The barbed wire serves as kind of like the slip in between each attachment of earth. So the barbed wire is like this other tool in terms of sustainability. So that's just, if we're talking just like what makes it super, what's the difference between Superadobe and maybe some other Adobe methods that we've been thinking about or are familiar with, I would say those are kind of the most obvious. But we can also kind of go more into maybe Steele, if you want to talk about like form or materials.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So like we were saying before, it's really all in the arch. So you take the arch shape and you turn it 360 degrees and you're going to get a dome. So, and then you take the same arch shape and you extend it and you're going to get a vault. So it's really about like the compression and the tensile strength with the barbed wire. And those two combined creates like this superstructure that's essentially like a giant cementitious shell
Yeah.
that's does really well in desert climates and stuff because of the walls and insulation and stuff.
Another thing I wanted to add to that too is you mentioned that it passes the California earthquake codes, and these, since the inception of the institute, these have been built around the world, and they've been past the tests of some of the worst earthquakes and hurricanes too, as well, because the shape of the dome, the wind just passes directly over it. It's like an eggshell set in the ground, and since it is just earth and it's very heavy and there's barbed wire between each row, when there's an earthquake, it just kind of dances with the earth. It doesn't crack and break. It's not trying to hold a rigid form. And then the other thing is of particular interest, I think, especially now, is they're quite fireproof. So
yeah, extremely fireproof. If anything, they would actually strengthen if they were to be caught on fire. That is a traditional way of strengthening Adobe, as they would light them on fire for multiple days. And it's essentially just like a ceramic pot. Yeah. So it's truly, in a way, indestructible and also so accessible. And yeah.
Has value in those areas. It's also very simple. That's part of what makes it accessible, I suppose, is the materials that you use that are needed or required is just sandbags, barbed wire, and earth. You can use cement. Cement helps protect against moisture. That would be the weakness of the structure, I would say. You have to be very aware of water, how water moves across the land where you're going to build, how much inclement weather there is in the area. So there's a whole world of ways to manage the water. You can use natural methods, like you could use cob and then reapply it after rain, making sure that you're not building in a place where there's going to be a lot of water just sitting, or you can form the land to move around the building as well. Talk about the tools a little bit.
Tools? Yeah, tools are pretty generic. You have buckets, shovels, a wheelbarrow, a tamper, which is essentially just a large plate, a metal plate with a rod sticking out of it, and that's just to compress the earth. So every layer you're gonna compress the earth before you would add another one. You have a compass, which that goes into dome building, which I think you would be better at explaining that.
So you wouldn't need a compass if you're using this technology just to build a wall or a planter bed or steps.
Yeah.
Something more simple.
A compass is essentially to stay on path with the arch, because the strength is in the arch. So it's like you really want to get that right. You don't want to be building like a tube or something. You want like a pretty You
want to make sure it's a correct dome.
Yeah, you would want a correct dome.
And then you'd need knife or scissors to cut the sandbags if you are running with a tube sandbag. Cutters for your barbed wire, obviously. And then if you're using cement, cement mixers highly recommended. You can obviously mix by hand still. And then forms for windows or doors, which can be made out of pretty much anything that you find that meets what you're looking for. You can either build one out of wood, or you can use sandbags.
You can use car tires, buckets.
Which we're using.
Yeah, I don't know if you could see it in the picture above, but we're actually going to be using a car tire for one of the forms.
Forms on the wall.
Which is really exciting because I've heard that it's extremely successful. So,
Can I just?
Of course.
Are we all able to see the PowerPoint?
I can see it.
Can Joe see it?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure. Just because if anybody's taking notes, like it's listed, so I just want to double check. Okay. Sorry.
No, I appreciate
okay,
it.
yeah.
Thank you.
That's cute.
Yeah. I mean, the benefits, we've talked about them, right? I included this photo because one of the benefits that we often maybe don't think about is the process. So as someone who writes, I'm like thinking about process a lot, right? A lot of us as artists think about process, and the process of building with earth is really community oriented. And so just in the process of the last couple of days, having friends and community come by and participate, and with kind of the same kind of intellectual, creative curiosity. And if you do look at the history and you do understand how and why building with Adobe has the kind of complex and enriched cultural significance, is because it is a kind of community-oriented act. Building homes for one another, right? I help you with your home, you help me with my home, and we think about community and community building different. And I think all of us right now, maybe in this moment, we're seeing how there are these systems that don't work and have never worked, and maybe have been lies that told us that capitalism is supposed to work for folks, and it doesn't, right? And so in 2020, thinking critically and creatively about alternative futures is something that I know I am, and we are deeply invested in. At the same time, of course, sustainability, all those reasons that we talked about, how sustainable it is, the cost of it, right? Really thinking about right now climate change and earthquakes and fires. I don't have to tell you what we're living through right now, right? So all of these are obviously huge benefits in terms of building with earth. And I think for us, you know, just in the builds that we're doing, there's also this ephemeral thing that's happening that I think you can't quantify, right? That there is a kind of meditation process in building. Even in the silence, things are happening, and also in just like, I don't like power tools, right? I just don't like power tools. And the fact that we're building and working with shovels and earth has been a kind of, at least for me, a really liberating process and an empowering process that I think, and I want to really encourage people to think about and consider, right? At the same time, there's other things to consider, that you can get really ambitious and maybe I think the biggest thing to consider, often folks are like, wow, I could build this whole house for, you know, materials, maybe like a 3-bedroom thing for like $10,000. That's cheaper than my car, you know, I have whatever. And so they get really excited by that. But then to think about really these other factors, which is the biggest, is labor, right? And time. And so understanding how much labor is involved is important. And also thinking about how much time, like we're only building a 6-foot altar space, right? And it's really not that big, but it's been weekends long, right? Because you know, first I have to clear things, and then I'm working you know, sometimes by myself, sometimes with one other person, sometimes with 3 people, sometimes, you know. And so I think you really need to think about also like the physical demand of this, which is, it is hard. You're not working with power tools, and you're not maybe, you know, working with a lot of really technical, you know, tools that it's like I can use a shovel, I can use these, I can use a water bucket, I can do these, I could, you know, do a wheelbarrow, but you know, tamping, filling, shoveling, digging, it's a lot on your body, right? And so even just outside in this weather, and then also the conditions, we just went through a lot of fires, so building outside wasn't very, you know, wasn't the best in terms of air quality, right? Breathing in certain things. Access to water, you have to think about your access to water, where you're building, and do you have access to water as you're building, right? Because the adobe does need to be a little bit wet. And then other things like mold and erosion, and plaster. How are you going to plaster it once you do have a form? Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I have a couple things. I saw a question a little while ago about how you would use a tire for a form. If you see right in that picture, there's just wooden forms set in the wall. It'd be very similar to that on that picture below. Yeah, that with the wood. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So you basically will just lay bags around it. You would need to put a shims of some sort around whatever the form is going to be, so that you can remove it once the wall is set. You also would need to use something to fortify the bags, unless you're going to leave the form in. But you can. All the technical information for if you're thinking of building a house, I would strongly suggest going to the Institute. But for the labor and for how much time, just start on a small project. You could do like a planter bed, and that will really give you a feel for it, because you're literally filling the bags yourself. You're mixing the mix yourself, potentially by hand. And then once the bags are placed, you have to strike them until they're flat with the tamper, which makes them like a rock. You're basically making like tube-shaped stones out of these forms. And then after that's done, you take barbed wire and weave it into the bag, which is not easy for your fingers. For anyone who's ever manipulated barbed wire before, it doesn't always cooperate. So just I guess a few things to add to what Joelle was saying.
So yeah, I won't get too much into what we're building, but as a ceramic artist, and as just somebody who's, you know, going through what all of us are going through, thinking, meditating on it, I really felt like we really need to reevaluate our relationships with institutions, our dependency on certain institutions, and then what would it mean to reimagine our modes of dreaming, which is, you know, something that I want to continue to do with my daily practice. And part of that is I felt like in this moment really called to reading more and studying more philosophy and, you know, meditation, and in that thinking critically about the 7 directions, not just north, south, east, and west, but up, down, and center. And so in that we are building, and I'm creating altar spaces in this wall. As you can see, the tree, she does not care. Like she went through metal, she's gone through wood. She just, you know, she is her own life force. And so we are building around her, and taking out as much wire as we can. And with the curvature, we're actually bringing more strength to the structure and the sculpture. And what I'm imagining is these 7 altars, these 7 direction spaces being used with objects found in my garage, like buckets and tires and things like pipes. We're using pipes also, that we can also, you know, use that as sacred space, but to maybe even, you know, help each other, showcase each other's work as artists. I'm thinking about right now, a lot of institutional spaces are closed, shows got canceled, concerts got canceled, and wanting to lift up each other and give and think about space in different ways. So part of that is reimagining spaces that we occupy, right? And so I'm thinking about how work can be showcased in those spaces, and not waiting for someone's permission or acceptance into certain spaces, but actually just showcasing them in the spaces that we have. So that's part of it. It's multi-layered. There's lots of other layers in terms of thinking about the wall itself and this political moment and landscape that we're in. The idea about walls, right? And for me, this is more of a portal space. So thinking about what wormholes we'll get, we'll open up and participate and play in. So yeah, that's a little bit. We want to open it up to questions and answers.
Thank you.
Maybe just more questions.
There were some questions in the chat that I wanted to, let's see, maybe we can answer first. Someone asked, would you say cement would be a good way to work around humid, rainy areas in Texas?
It doesn't work around it. It would make it so that the forms, oh, thank you. It would make it so that the structures don't lose their shape if they do get wet, but it wouldn't protect you from things like mold once they got wet on the inside. So to protect from rain, you want to make sure that your plaster's sound, and you want to make sure that you have a good like trench system around the outside of the structure if you're going to be living within it. It has more to do with where you put the structure and what you put around it and what you put on top of it. So if you build, I mean, making it cementitious makes it so it won't change form. If it does get wet over time, it'll last that 1,000 years or more. But it wouldn't protect from things like mold or delaminating of the plaster if it did get wet, because it'll expand and contract.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered the question. It adds more, but it makes it so the structure will hold its form when it gets wet. That's basically what it adds.
Mm.
Otherwise it gets mushy. It's earth, so it'll just turn into a jello tube until it dries again. But if your plaster is sound, and if you reapply it as much as necessary, then you can have something that's just earth and cob potentially.
Interesting. Second question was, can you please elaborate on the form and use of tires?
Sure.
I saw that one. I tried to speak to it earlier. Any form that you're going to put in the wall, you just build around it, and then you have a hole in the wall where the form is.
You'd want to be cautious, because there's the chance that when the cement in the bag dries, it could essentially encase what you're going to be using as a form. So you would want a method where you can remove the form, unless the form would be like permanent in the structure. So like you would put spacing in, which would be like maybe small splints or something like that.
Shims.
Yeah, or even like you can even use non-cementitious bag as a form, and then break the bag apart later on when everything's dried and cured. So if that helps.
Yeah.
Two questions asked about what is the permitting process like in California? And then someone said it varies from cities or counties. And And then I guess LA County, that's where we're at.
It's county to county. Currently in San Bernardino County, where the institute is, they are against it. But I think that's because they're trying to get that land to build houses on it.
Yeah, it's sitting in the middle of suburbs. So
Now.
they had bought the land before, and it was essentially open desert, and they've built suburbs completely around the whole campus. So I imagine they have a bid on how long yeah.
But yeah, it would be, getting a permit would be getting to know the person that at your local government office and talking to them.
Yeah, it's really right now, because it's not permitted throughout the United States through, like, I think what's the ICC,
International Construction Code.
Yeah, it's really case to case. It varies on your county and who you're dealing with, and how much exposure they've had previously to Adobe and Superadobe structures, and yeah.
I know that probably the closest one that has a permit to us that has recently was in Claremont. They have it's a retail space, but they were permitted and did get permission. There's also a lot of Adobe structures in Joshua Tree that have been recently made. I think also if you're thinking about like just maybe building a dome, depending on size, you might not even have to go through a permit process, right? So it depends on size and scale, and how also you're using it. Are you using it to actually house folks, or using it for a community space, ceremony space, meditation space? Like it can be, those are different things to think about too.
Yeah, there's ways around it. If it's under a certain amount of square footage and you have a pre-existing structure on your property, you could fall under that and just build it without permitting, because it would be considered like a shed essentially. But like even that is probably county to county. And then there's the whole legality things, and following those rules. But it is do what you will. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to recommend doing anything illegal, but if you're trying to build a structure, it's on you.
We almost all the time recommend that. Well, just the direct action approach. But you in Claremont, there's a spot called In Common Good.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And they have like a farm, and they distribute fresh produce to like families nearby.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
So maybe if anyone wants to check them out, you can ask like what the process was like, and yeah, go if you want to go that route. But if you got land and you got, I don't know, ways to make things secretive, then I don't know, go for it. Learn by doing.
Absolutely.
You can build them in the ground.
Yeah, you can submerge them and have like just the cap peeking out.
The more weight that's on them, the stronger they get. They work in compression.
So there's definitely if there's a will, there's a way, and I will always be in supportive of people doing it outside of the system.
Somebody says, do you know if anyone has built in a gray water system on a Superdome?
A gray water system. I mean,
yeah, I can imagine it's possible.
You can run water and electricity through them. You just go through the walls. So you could, any sort of water system, clean water or gray water and electricity, you can do piping in the walls. Even if it's cementitious, you just cut into the walls and then plaster over whatever you've done.
Yeah.
Is there a plaster product or a manufacturer that you recommend using? Hi, Ellie Lee. Thank you for being here.
I don't have any on.
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing and what you're looking for, because plaster is a whole world that you could get into. If you're trying to make it with the minimum amount of like footprint, then you would want to do something like cob, which melts. So that's like clay and straw mix. and then you apply that plaster, and then whenever it gets wet, it'll melt off, and then you take the melt off from the ground and then remake it and then put it back on the wall. I've used stucco and lime plaster, and you could make your own kind of just at home plaster mix with earth and a little bit of cement. Also, it's just smooth. You want it smoother with more fine aggregates.
Yeah, so you would grate the earth, and you can use like Portland cement and stuff.
Washed sand. But no, I haven't built enough to have like a preferred one. I currently would just go with like a generic one and try it.
Yeah, and then I recommend searching on YouTube and finding people on Instagram or Twitter who've done this previously and just like picking their brain on it. Most people who do this type of building are almost always down to share their process. Yeah, because it really isn't widely known. So
it's more of a community thing. What were some of the other questions? I've seen them popping up, but I can't keep track of all of them.
Yeah, I think we at least I know that I did do some plaster workshop, or I did a plaster doing this process. I'm also down to open up to folks who want to know what I did. I'll share the process we get there. You know, I'm open to seeing with plaster, it can be also really timely, right? We've talked about how much time plaster can take. It's a lot, especially depending on what kind of texture you want. If you want something more smooth, it's going to be a lot of fine tuning and getting things to that maybe aesthetic value that you're looking for. But yeah, maybe that can be another question and answer space or place if you guys are down.
Part 2.
Yeah. We're learning by doing. So that's like our big way. I really encourage folks. It may seem like a little bit overwhelming, but like Emery and Steele said, and encourage really starting with something small, kind of building your confidence and familiarity with the materials, then you know, gradually, you know, start building on those skills and expanding the vision of what you want to build. C1 says, do you? I heard that Cobb building is going to be included in the International Permit Code in 2021. Do you think that will make it easier to build Superadobe structures?
I know that CalEarth is trying to get Superadobe passed through the International Code Commission as well. They've been working on it for a few years, I think. Yeah. So I don't know. I hope so. Because as soon as that gets passed, it'll be considered a form of masonry. And then even if your local government doesn't know what that is, it's like international code, so it's accepted. I don't know. Yeah, I hope so. Cross your fingers.
Is there a particular season that you recommend building in?
I mean, you can build in any season. It's really what you're willing to put up with.
Not in the hottest or the rainiest.
Yeah, I think I would recommend like summer into like fall. I think it's a good time because it's drier. You're not really dealing with like random weather.
Moisture. And
if it snows in your area, that can completely halt building. So yeah.
But depending on the type of bag you use, but regardless of the structure, if you cover it between builds, so if you have to halt for some reason, if you're able to tarp over it, it'll last for you. So you can like do it in sections and tarp it and cover it and then come back to it and continue once the season improves.
I've known people who've been building for years, the same structure, and just like every other weekend they'll go out to the property and they'll do like a little segment here and there, and it's like, it's long, but like you know,
in the end you have a house. There's a house I visited in like Apple Valley area, and it was a man who built it just with his 2 children, and they took 10 years to do it, but it was just 10 years of weekends, and now he has a retirement house that he now lives in. So they have it all solar powered. And pretty cool. It was really well done.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as far as specific seasons, just I would avoid the extremes. Cold is not quite as bad because it cools you off kind of, but like you don't want snow and water because you can't really build in that.
Yeah.
Doesn't dry.
Amy, do you have a question that you want to ask? You can unmute yourself, or I don't know if we...
Yep, that would be great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. I guess I have 2 questions. One of them is, I think I've known about Superadobe for a while, and I feel like I'm always just kind of caught by the fact that you do need these like kind of very specific industrially produced materials. I don't know if you have any like feelings about that, if there are any alternatives that you have worked with. And then also just curious as to where the altar space is.
Sure. I mean, so you mean like the barbed wire and the bag? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
I mean, I know folks, like Joe and I were talking the other day about, living in the SGV and just building relationships with restaurants and using rice bags, right? But essentially that's exactly what it is. And those will actually be easier to fill by yourself if you are working alone. And then the barbed wire is helping with, like we said before, just kind of using that slipping and scoring. So creating that tension in between each row. I think in terms of the dome, we talked about the arch and the dome space. That is also helping, right, sustain itself. But I don't know, maybe Emery and Steele can talk about what would it mean to not use the barbed wire.
So part of Nader's, what he was searching for was things that you could find like in emergency situations. So like in areas where there was a catastrophe and you're trying to build a new village very quickly for people who've all lost their homes, not just tents.
Yeah, and like war zones and stuff like that. So it's like, what are you gonna find in a place that's been like ripped apart and there's not much left? And there's like, you're gonna find sandbags, and you're gonna find barbed wire, and you're gonna find earth, and you're gonna find people who need shelter.
Yeah.
So it's like, it really goes into that of like emergency settings type of thing.
So like as far as alternatives for this mode of building, I would say no. But there's other ways to build that are even, if you're trying to avoid the high carbon footprint materials. But in terms of usage for these high carbon footprint materials, the structure will last 1,000 years. So it's like you're putting it into a place where it'll be used like as a home for a very long time. But yeah, if you're looking to avoid using those materials, then you could do something more like cob building, which Steele has a little bit more experience with. But
yeah, I don't think I would a good representative of cob building, but cob's essentially just like hay and earth and clay, and then you have a separate structure that has a roof on it. So the cob, sorry, I'm trying to like remember. So it's like you have a frame that's going to be separate from the walls that are made out of cob. So essentially the whole walls can fall down, but you'll still have a roof on your head. And the roof is going to help rain and snow from not hitting the cob, which like will just help longevity wise.
So yeah, other modes, ways of building potentially.
There's a place that specializes in cob building and like refining it, and it's called Coil Springs, and I would recommend checking them out. I don't know how we would put that information written down somewhere, but they have some cool things going, and they have really expansive and like better information on Cobb. Yeah.
And you could YouTube
Yeah.
Cobb building also.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And then the second question, so the office is in my backyard, and it's between my studio space that I share with a lot of other clay folks, and where I sleep. So kind of like this path between both spaces. Yeah. And it's in East LA. I guess that's the other place, yeah, that it's in. California, indigenous land.
Someone had asked earlier if let's see, about how long you all would think it would take to build a 12-foot circumference dome with 4 people.
Assuming 12-foot diameter through the middle length, because the circumference, a 12-foot diameter with 4 people. I guess it depends on how much skill they have and if all the materials are available. Assuming, I don't know, let me think. 12-foot, 4 people. Just for the shell, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It depends on how many hours you're putting in every day.
Yeah. If you're doing like 8 to 10 hours a day for solid, like 5 out of 7 days of a week, you could probably get it done in like 2 to 3, maybe.
Weeks?
Weeks?
Or
Yeah,
days?
2 to 3, no, not 2 to 3 days, no.
And then a 12-foot dome will be pretty tall also. And the way that you build this is on the wall. So just the wider it gets, the taller it gets, and you build it standing on the wall, laying the bag. So it's a scaling thing that the larger it gets, the amount of labor increases proportionally.
Mm-hmm.
So like 12 is very doable with 4 people. I would say a couple weeks probably.
Yeah.
A couple months.
If I recall from, I guess, some of my own research, is there a limit to how, I guess, the diameter you would want to be building, right? I mean, I'm not trying to build mega mansions.
Yeah. So with this technology, the objective really isn't to be like ginormous.
It's almost like smaller is better.
Yeah, smaller is better, just build wise, because it really starts to get nerve wracking when you're, like 20 feet in the air and someone's handing you 20 pounds of earth and you're trying to pack it, and it just turns into something else that can be, I don't know, straining in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the work starts to become disproportionate to what you're getting. I mean, if you have 30 people that are working on it, but like
and it goes, go ahead, sorry.
I would say like 18 feet diameter would be like pushing it. Yeah, that's huge.
How big is Strawville?
20, 25.
Yeah,
maybe.
we have a structure. There is a structure at the Institute in Cal Earth, and they have a 20-foot diameter, and that was with straw bale. So they had a slightly different technique, but even that I've heard was like extremely nerve-wracking to build, and I'm pretty sure they said that they probably wouldn't do it again.
Yeah. You would want to, getting to that point, you're getting to where you're building scaffolding, things like that.
But it's possible, if that answers.
Yeah,
it's doable.
So just a really quick, like little bit of information. The width of the wall is 1/12 of the diameter. So if your diameter is 20, then your walls need to be 20. If your diameter is 20 feet, the walls need to be 20 inches. And 20 inches is a large sandbag to fill.
And
it's a lot.
Goes a lot of buttressing.
Yeah. Somebody asked to see a picture of the barbed wire. So I don't know, this was like the only photo on the presentation that I have more photos. I'm documenting the whole thing. But here's the photo. We just go right if we were building a dome, we would probably do it a little different. But for a wall structure, we just go down the middle, right? We're laying this barbed wire down the middle, and it's
Typically down the middle, unless it's the structure's really large, then you have to do 2 strands. But normally the barbed wire goes down the middle.
Mhm.
hope that helps.
Between bags. So you do 1 bag, tamp it so it's flat, and then you lay barbed wire over it,
Mhm.
and then you do another bag over that barbed wire, and then tamp that, and it locks them with friction together.
Yeah.
And
4
weight.
prong.
4-prong wire.
Yeah. When you fill the bag, it's not as flat. See how like nicely flat this is? It's obviously not that way when you're filling it. And then, so I say in terms of height, if you wanted to know, like 1 row of bag we discovered is a little less than half a foot, right?
Yeah, it's like 4
4 to
5 inches.
Yeah, it depends on how much we're filling it.
Yeah.
So that gives you a kind of, you're working for every row that you're building, and you're only getting 4 inches, right? If you're thinking about time, energy, space, and then I know the question was trying to build with 4 people. 4 does seem to be kind of like a really good balance of packing and earth and tamping and laying the bag. But what I would say too is that you have to remember different folks' ability to do and participate, and that can also, you know, mean different restrictions in terms of time and energy. And also think about like your access to these materials. Like if you do have access to use the earth below you, that's great. There's a lot of earth that folks are willing to share on like OfferUp and Craigslist. But also think about the time commitment of getting that earth and bringing it to the space that you're building. So there's a lot of things like that I think I know that for me there was a kind of naivete of thinking like, yes, this is going to be done in a couple of weeks, and then realizing that like, oh yeah, like my body, I have to listen to my body, I have to listen to other people's bodies, we have to be in a kind of rhythm and safety for everyone, and then thinking about also just the higher you go, the more complicated it is. All those things mean different capacities for different people. Do you all provide trainings for communities? We plan on doing an Adobe project. We're thinking of starting and learning how to do a stove. I mean, I'm willing to share resources. I'm willing to share knowledge. I think it's really about like learning as you do, and then and reaching out to folks that you know have some experience. Like I think that that's really helpful, and I'm willing to share that. I've built a large gourmand for Reseda Park, and I did. It was about 3 feet wide, and then there was Adobe base to that. But yeah, I can share what I know. I think yeah, resources and time and stuff. I can just speak for myself though.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself like a trainer. I'm like right out of an internship class. So it's more of just I'm willing to share knowledge and help with projects. If someone's interested in wanting help for a project, I am excited to get on builds and things. But aside from that, haven't taught classes, or I've assisted in teaching, but that's kind of the level of it.
Yeah.
Do y'all know any folks in Texas?
I don't personally
No,
know.
I don't. What are you thinking of building in Texas?
Hello.
Just looking for friends, maybe.
No, we have a piece of
Sorry.
land in Texas.
Sorry, I thought I was muted.
Oh,
It's okay.
But yeah, we're a part of an intertribal community here in Texas, and so our elders have given us permission to build a sweat lodge, but we want to get ahead of the curve and start working with Adobe through the stove. But our long-term projects are to build on land. Like we want to build structures, right? So we figured we would start small with like the stoves, and then once traveling isn't as hard, then we could bring our elders from Mexico down so they could walk us through like the ceremonial building of the sweat lodge. But we would already like have somewhat of an introduction through the stoves. But I do one of our other elders has property in West Texas, and there's 50 acres there, and the dream of like our elder before they passed was to build a village. And so like we're like, that's like the long term, right? But since we're all city folks, we're just like, well, why don't we start like practicing here before we take like a crew of like people that have never been to the desert, into the desert to start building like houses and stuff. And yeah, so it's just like it's a project that we kind of just started like in really small like increments, but it does have like a pretty long term like vision. And so I guess like the reason that we're here today, it's myself and Red from our group, is to just kind of get more acquainted with like people of color doing this work, because what we run into here in Texas is that there's a lot of folks doing like cob and like sustainable building, but a lot of them are especially here in San Antonio are I forget what they call them, but they're more like folks that are trying to like arm themselves and like build like
yeah. You get doomsday preppers.
Yes, I forget what it's called, but they're like those kind of people. And so one of our elders went to one of their trainings, and she was like, oh no, like these people are crazy. Like that's not who we want to work with. So we're just looking for resources for now, but eventually we would love to have people of color like showing us how to do the work.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll just stay in touch, because I think I just opened up a big bag of like worms.
Well, that sounds awesome, actually. That building a village in the desert sounds like it's exactly what this technology is asking for, to be honest.
Yes.
Worms are good too.
Yeah, and I mean we've
Yeah.
seen the community in Taos, New Mexico, that builds like earth ships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So which is cool, but I'm like, I think it would be cool to build something like that with like primarily like people, Black and Indigenous people of color, queer folks of color. I think that would be like amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that like I echo a lot of your feelings, and I've had and experienced that as well. And I think that I want to encourage like learning by doing. And even if like a stove, like if you're like, oh, this is a lot, like a really good, like even like a cute bench, right? Like just a cute bench or a seating space or a planter box that's, only a couple feet off the ground, and that you're going to, and then it's kind of infectious, and the right folks will gravitate to the project, right? I think that that's it's encouraging to see like how many people showed up tonight, right? And how many folks are interested in on a Friday night and in 2020, like, you know, like this is the Zoom that they chose to be at tonight. And in that same way, you know, you just start on something small and folks will show up. The right folks will show up. I believe in that as well. And I know that other people, just like in this small project that I'm working on, like folks are asking questions and imagining what they can build. So it's encouraging that you're here. There's a Facebook group for Cal Earth if you're on Facebook, and sometimes I've seen folks who have posted on there, and you can be as, I think it's important to be as explicit as you want of like what you're looking for and the kind of help that you want. And folks can respond, right?
Okay. I shared, I mean, I saved your email, so maybe I'll get the links from you, from the Facebook group and stuff. But no, I agree. I think, you know, once you start working with the earth, like it provides that, it opens that pathway to have, you know, the right people show up. And I like what you said about the planter, because the beginning of our project is to get like all of the families in our community their own gardens. So I think maybe having them like have their like make a little bench to sit next to their plants or something would be like or a little stool, you know, like that might be something that people can do in their own homes. So I like that idea. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
And I put my email in the chat as well. Yeah.
Cool.
I wonder how to do that.
There were a few other questions, I think. One was about how Superadobe structures are for temperature regulation. So like example, especially for heat waves. I learned, or I heard that, you know, because of the earth, you're using it to build, and like, especially if you dig it into the ground, it helps regulate the temperature. Like sometimes if it's hot outside, it could be cool inside, or if it's cold outside, it's hot outside. I don't know if you've had any experiences with this, but that's just something I'm sharing that I've heard. I don't know if it's true or not, but.
Good question.
Regulation temperature from the walls.
So the thickness of the walls with Superadobe protects from the rays of the sun for like a day's length, and then at night the walls will irradiate heat back outside. So in heat and in the summer sun in the desert, Superadobe is extremely good. It'll keep you cool as long as you have, you know, good ventilation and you allow for it to pass through. It's good with regulation. And then in the cold, you just want to make sure that you have something to insulate you, because it's like a stone. It's like you're inside of a stone shell pretty much. But as far as from heat, it'll protect you from the heat and from the sun completely. Did you have anything to add?
As for the cold, you can get them pretty warm on the inside. We had a dome on site that had a large rocket mass stove in there, and we would use it as like a sauna dome, and it can contain heat pretty well. Just for consideration, the larger the structure is, the higher the ceiling is going to be, and of course heat rises, so you can lose a lot of heat the larger the structure is. So, yeah.
It's easier to keep them cool than to get them warm.
It definitely it does well. It's definitely drier, hotter climates.
Yeah,
it's really made for it.
It's desert architecture.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Real quick, I just want to remind folks, it's almost 9 p.m., but we always pass the time, because conversation, we like to let it free and flowing. So not opposed if we want to continue asking questions or have any comments or further see where this dialogue is, but just wanted to let that know, doing a little time check. And if anyone has to leave for whatever reason, we won't. I won't be hurt by it. So go ahead. And this is all going to be uploaded on YouTube, and we can perhaps further engage in dialogue through there. So just letting folks know. So yeah.
Was there other questions, Joe?
For myself,
Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, hi. My name is Stephanie. I go by Castro. I just wanted to know there was a Facebook group mentioned, and I'm sorry if I missed the name earlier, but if y'all could please share that, I'd love to dive deeper into that. And thank you so much for hosting this event. This is really great information. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not on Facebook though.
Yeah, I'm not either, but it's the Cal Earth Facebook page. They have a Facebook group. That's like,
Okay, cool. Thank you.
you can email them and tell the project you're working on, and we will
Oh,
blast.
Cal Earth.
Yeah. And they will blast a announcement to members who have gone through workshops or people who have built, and they will like see if there's any folks that are interested. I know I've gotten emails like, they're doing a build here and they're doing a build here, and would you like to participate? And you can be as specific as you want in that. Like, what are you looking for? Who would you like to help you? Like, folks have said stuff like, I want someone with X amount of experience, right? Or I'm looking for someone who has built this particular kind of object, or even location, right? Language, all those things. So you can be really specific if you're looking for someone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question real quick, and forgive me if you all went over it already, but about the earth composition. Like, is it a certain ratio of sand, or the soil quality? Is it loamy, or I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but asking about that.
All right, path.
You want to go first?
I mean, it varies.
Yeah.
You can do a soil sample, which is essentially just scooping out a few inches of the earth that you have that you're going to build on site with. And you'd put that in a jar, and you'd use a deflaculant, so something that's going to separate all of the materials from each other. A deflaculant could be like, I think it's like dish soap, salt, like things like that. And you let that settle for a few days, and essentially what's going to happen is the silt's going to rise to the top, and it's going to go clay, and then it's going to go sand, it's going to go gravel. And you really want to see like what your composition is for building, because if it's too silty, then you're gonna need to import materials. If it's too much clay, yeah, you may need like sand and stuff.
Sand or gravel.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have very very heavy clay or very very heavy silt, or mixtures of the two, it reduces the amount that it will compact into a solid like stone, because clay and silt are very fine particles, so it'll kind of stay, and it won't bind with cement if you do use cement. So this is the question's particularly important if you're going to use cement. You need to be more cautious with the aggregates that are in the mix of earth. But it also depends on like the level of what you're not the level, but the situation, the circumstance on the build. If you're building like a house that you want to last 1,000 years or something like that, something that's going to be a substantial build, then you would want to know what's in your aggregates, depending on your area. Desert areas tend to have more gravel in them, in the earth right there on the build. But I know with this technology, kind of one of the backbones of it for Nader is that you can really use it anywhere, and it'll give you something that'll stand as long as you're using the arch principles correctly, and as long as your measurements and your angles are correct, then the arch form will give you compression that will hold. But to get more detailed information on the aggregates, I would suggest taking a class or taking a class at Cal Earth or looking it up online. They'll give you into the percentages that you're looking for and the PSI that you get out of different mixes and stuff. It's like another whole world kind of like.
If y'all can see, I'm putting this image up.
You have the screen still shared.
Oh, okay. How do I not do that? I was like holding it. Okay, I'm gonna stop share. Okay. Hi everyone. So here's just like if you want to do a quick screenshot, but you can find this online as well.
Yeah, soil sample test.
Yeah.
So if you're really high on the clay and silt content, it's not going to form like a stone as much. The bags will move more. But if you're structurally sound on your build, then you're still great. That's what I was taught.
How much of that? I guess dish soap. I don't know the technical term you said. Oh, I can't recall it. But how much would you use to put in the jar if you had a soil sample?
I haven't done it. You may be able to.
Yeah. You want to go ahead?
You may be able to look that up online for a soil sample test. Deflocculant is the word. So like a flock of sheep.
Nice.
Yeah, you separate. It depends on the size of your jar, essentially. Yeah. So you're gonna want to fill up at least like 40% of the jar. You want a jar that you're gonna be able to see each layer with. So like something that's clear and probably round would be the best thing. If that helps.
I have a question. After you build the structure with the Adobe, how do you do the walls? Do you like use mud? Is it plaster? And what do you recommend?
All of it.
Yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. So after you build the shell or like the skeleton with the Superadobe bags, the plaster on the walls is basically, it's up to you. It's doing research on plaster and what you're trying to look to accomplish. So if you want something that's all natural, I would go with something like cob, which is clay and straw, but it takes more work because you have to reapply it when it gets wet. It'll melt off, but you can just take what melted off will be sitting at the base of your house, and you can just remix that and put it back on. Or if you want something that's not going to melt off, then you would use like a cementitious plaster or a lime plaster, which operate differently. But those would both work also they basically protect your house from getting wet and moist, and which would protect you from mold, things like that. Mud, cob is like mud. It's like the idea of using mud to protect your house.
You could totally get some earth and wet it to a consistency that you like and throw it on the building and like that'll do it.
Just have to keep.
Yeah, a big thing would be like you do want to protect the bag from UV exposure because it will start to disintegrate. And if your mix isn't cementitious, then essentially when the bag goes, the house starts going with it too. Over time, it's not an immediate thing.
Decades.
Yeah, it would take a few years.
Still.
But yeah, for preservation reasons, you definitely want to like protect the bag and stuff like that.
Even if you don't do anything and you just lay the bag and leave it bare to be exposed to the elements, it'll take a long time to erode away, but it will just erode away eventually.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate this. I put my email in there if folks have questions or if folks want to also, like, if you're local and you want to look or help or take photos, I'm open to sharing just the little bit of space and work that we're doing, you can email me and we can figure something out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good night.
Yeah. Have a good night. It was nice meeting all of
Oh
you.
shit.
Mhm.
Have a good
Awesome.
night. Nice meeting everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
luck on your belts.
Yeah, good luck everyone. I know.
And again, if anyone, we're based, well, we are Regenerative Collective. We're based out of East Los Angeles, San Gabriel Valley, Northeast Los Angeles. So if anyone's interested in meeting up and doing any of these projects, you know, that's what's it about. Growing together, building together, reimagining together. So hit us up. We're down. We've even created some support groups. You know, if folks have questions about like even pottery, or folks about planting, you know, whatever. The sky's the limit. So again, thank you, Steele, Emery, Jam, for coming, for doing this presentation. It's been great. And those who are on YouTube, it's gonna be cheesy, but go ahead, like, subscribe. I don't know, where, comment. Ask any questions, and if folks have any other ideas or any topics they would like to propose or even facilitate, you know, that's what it's about. We're all here learning by doing, and we don't necessarily need to go and spend hundreds of dollars to go for a certification program or go through some institution that we can't afford and end up in debt and feel super stressed, as if we're not already. So we're trying to break those barriers and create I don't know, whatever we can do now. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye.